Irmgard Fuchner was wheeled into the courtroom to face the charges, accessory to murder of thousands of people, including the systematic extermination of thousands of Jews. Her lawyers say she rejects that she's personally responsible for any crime.
They once lived in luxury and power, married to the most feared men of Nazi Germany, surrounded by privilege and denial. Their lives unraveled when the Third Reich fell. As Hitler's empire crumbled, some faced death in his bunker, while others endured disgrace, isolation, and obscurity. This is the haunting aftermath faced by the wives of Nazi leaders, women who stood beside monsters, only to face the cold reckoning of history after World War II ended. Their fate remains a chilling chapter. Eva Braun, Adolf Hitler's wife. Eva Braun had been Hitler's partner since their first meeting in 1929. Yet their relationship was kept largely private for most of its existence, as Hitler preferred to maintain a singular image to the German public. Throughout the 30s and early 40s, Braun resided at Hitler's Berghof chalet in Berchtesgaden, engaging in domestic activities that were far removed from the political sphere. While her presence provided Hitler with a sense of normalcy and relaxation, she held no public position and did not sway his political decisions. By January 1945, as Soviet troops advanced into Berlin, Hitler moved to the Führer Bunker, an underground facility located 55 feet below the garden of the Reich Chancellery. Braun joined him later that month, determined to stay by his side despite evacuation orders. The bunker, consisting of 18 small rooms with its own water supply, electricity, and ventilation, became the hub of Hitler's last operations, filled with high-ranking Nazi officials, secretaries, and personal aides. As April 45 came to a close, the circumstances in Berlin worsened swiftly. Soviet artillery relentlessly bombarded the city, supply routes were severed, and the spirits of those in the bunkers sank dramatically. On April 28, Hitler chose to solidify his relationship with Braun, possibly as a declaration of loyalty amidst impending defeat. Shortly after midnight on April 28 to 29, Hitler and Braun appeared before Deputy Mayor Wagner, along with two witnesses, Joseph Goebbels and Martin Bormann, for a concise civil ceremony conducted under special wartime regulations that eliminated the standard waiting periods. According to the marriage license record, both affirmed their pure Aryan descent and absence of hereditary illnesses to meet Nazi racial standards. When signing her certificate, Braun struck out her maiden initial B for Braun and substituted it with Hitler, symbolically embracing her new identity as Eva Hitler. Following the ceremony, Hitler hosted a simple wedding breakfast for his close associates in a corridor that had been converted into a meeting room. Among those present were Goebbels, Magda Gerbles, Bormann, and secretaries such as Traudl Junge, whose memoirs vividly illustrate the bizarre contrast between the festive atmosphere and the grim reality of the war raging outside. Braun, dressed in a black silk taffeta gown selected by Hitler, showed no reluctance in committing herself to him on what would ultimately be their last fleeting day together. On April 30, the harsh realization that Berlin would soon fall led Hitler to take the drastic step of self-destruction. That morning, Hans Krebs informed Hitler that Soviet troops were about to overrun the city, which prompted Hitler to resolve to end his life rather than face capture. Braun, unwavering in her loyalty, insisted on staying by his side. Before their demises, Hitler dictated his final will and testament to Traudl Junge, while Braun mentally prepared herself for the impending act. At around 3:30 p.m. on April 30, Hitler and Braun retreated to Hitler's private study. Braun bit into a cyanide capsule while Hitler simultaneously shot himself. Though accounts differ slightly on whether he also consumed cyanide, the majority of credible testimonies, including those from Allied forensic examiners, affirm that he sustained a self-inflicted gunshot wound, along with cyanide ingestion. The combination of both methods, with Hitler having tested the effectiveness of cyanide on his dog Blondie earlier that day, guaranteed there was no chance of survival. Upon hearing a gunshot, staff members, including Hans Bauer and Jakob Denzinger, were called to the study, where they discovered Hitler and Braun lifeless, slumped together on a sofa. Following Hitler's orders, the bodies were transported to the garden behind the Reich Chancellery, soaked in petrol, and ignited in a shell crater to prevent their remains from being publicly displayed or desecrated. The incineration was only partially effective, and Soviet troops found the charred remains on May 2nd. Magda Gerbles, wife of Joseph Goebbels, Nazi propaganda minister. Magda Gerbles, originally named Johanna Maria Magdalena Ritschl, was born in Berlin on November 11, 1901. She became one of the most notable women in Nazi Germany as the spouse of propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels and a trusted confidant of Adolf Hitler. She joined the Nazi Party in September 1930 and swiftly ascended to lead a local women's organization. On December 19, 1931, she married Goebbels, with Hitler present as a witness. Throughout the 30s, she had 6 children with Joseph. Magda and Joseph Goebbels emerged as one of the most photographed couples in Nazi Germany, embodying the regime's vision of the perfect family. Their residence on Theodor Heusplatz in Berlin turned into a popular meeting spot for Nazi leaders, including Hitler, who took a personal interest in the children, frequently inviting them to his private quarters for chocolate cake and homework sessions, and occasionally holding baby Helga on his lap during late-night discussions with Joseph. However, behind closed doors, she grappled with Joseph's infidelities and the escalating horrors of Nazi policies. As early as 1938, Hitler's refusal to allow Magda a divorce from Goebbels highlighted her loyalty to both the party and her husband, despite her private concerns regarding Jacob's unfaithfulness. By mid-April 1945, as Soviet troops advanced towards Berlin, Magda, along with her 6 children and Joseph, relocated to the Vorbunker, which was linked to the Führer bunker situated beneath the Reich Chancellery Garden. Already suffering from illness and stress, with parts of her face partially paralyzed, and having spent previous weeks in a sanatorium, Magda found some comfort in Hitler's presence, who insisted that the family stay in the bunker. However, when she discovered that Hitler planned to take his own life, Magda became frantic, knocking on his door to seek his guidance. Hitler is said to have comforted her and reminded Joseph of his pledge of loyalty to die in Berlin. On April 29, Joseph appended a note to Hitler's final will, declaring that he and Magda would not leave Berlin, asserting that their children supported their choice to die rather than live in shame. The next day, following the self-destruction of Hitler and Eva Braun on April 30, Magda and Joseph arranged for SS dentist Helmut Kunz to give morphine to their 6 children, ranging in age from 3 to 12, so they could be administered cyanide. Kunz injected the sedative, but Magda and SS Obersturmbannführer Ludwig Stumpfegger manually delivered the lethal cyanide, with some historians claiming that Magda herself placed the capsules in her children's mouths. On May 2, 1945, Soviet forces stumbled upon the charred remains of Magda and Joseph. Magda's face was so severely burned that it was unrecognizable, and a Soviet autopsy indicated that her jawbones and teeth were found detached in the oral cavity, suggesting cyanide poisoning. The bodies of the 6 children were discovered by Soviet troops in the Vorbunker, dressed in their nightclothes with ribbons adorning the girls' hair. They had been placed in their cots and left undisturbed until Soviet medical officers conducted their examination on May 3rd. Subsequently, the remains of the Goebbels children, along with Magda, Joseph, and other occupants of the bunker, including General Hans Krebs and Hitler's dogs, were buried and exhumed multiple times. In 1970, following orders from KGB chief Yuri Andropov, a team exhumed 5 wooden boxes that contained the remains, incinerated them, crushed the ashes, and scattered them into the river, ensuring that no gravesite would turn into a Nazi shrine. However, for some Nazi wives, demise wasn't an option or part of the plan. Margarett Himmler, wife of Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS. Heinrich and Margarett tied the knot on July 3, 1928, in an intimate ceremony that excluded Himmler's family, who disapproved of Margarett's background as a Protestant and a divorcee. Their sole biological child, Gudrun Margarett Elfriede Emma Anna, arrived on August 8, 1929, and they subsequently adopted Gerhard von A, the son of an SS officer who was unalived in 1933. Margarett decided to sell her stake in the clinic and acquired land in Waltrudering, close to Munich, where they constructed a prefabricated house and tried their hand at raising livestock. However, these efforts largely failed due to Himmler's frequent absences. As Himmler's responsibilities grew, including the acquisition of a residence in Dahlem, Berlin, Margarett took over the management of their household and social events, hosting weekly gatherings for SS wives, despite encountering resistance from more aristocratic circles. At the onset of World War II, Margarett led a military hospital for the German Red Cross, and by December 1939 was in charge of hospitals in Military District 3, Berlin-Brandenburg. She undertook missions into occupied Poland, where her journals revealed strongly racist views. Her rise to the rank of colonel in the Red Cross highlighted her organizational skills and allegiance to the regime. However, her marriage faced challenges as Himmler's duties distanced him. His brother Gebhard described their relationship as being influenced by Margarett's extremely delicate nerves and her cool, hard demeanor. In 1938, Himmler initiated a relationship with his young secretary, Hedwig Potthast, who gave birth to 2 children, Helga and Nanette Dorothea, while Margarett remained his legal spouse. Even after discovering the affair in 1941, Margarett chose not to pursue a divorce, opting to uphold her social status, although their marriage had effectively ended by 1940 when they separated. This separation did not culminate in a legal divorce, highlighting Margarett's determination to maintain their marital connection, while Himmler continued to offer financial support and maintained close ties with Gudrun. In early April 1940, Margarett and Gudrun paid a visit to Heinrich at their home in Gmund, marking one of their final moments together before his departure and subsequent self-destruction by cyanide on May 23, 1945, while under British custody. As the war drew to a close, Margarett and Gudrun were apprehended by U.S. forces in northern Italy in May 1945 and detained near Rome during the Nuremberg trials, where they faced interrogation concerning Himmler's activities and their own roles during the war. In 1948, Margarett was designated as a Category 3 lesser offender during the denazification process in Bielefeld, a classification she contested in court by arguing that her early membership in the Nazi Party was nominal and linked to her work with the Red Cross. The committee ultimately determined that her ideological support for her husband's actions and her early enrollment in the party indicated culpability, resulting in ongoing restrictions and social ostracism. Despite these challenges, she lived a comfortable life, maintaining the Waltrudering property and residing in Munich, never publicly expressing remorse for her involvement in the regime. Margarett Himmler passed away on August 25, 1967, in Munich, West Germany, at the age of 73. She was said to have remained proud of her marriage to the former Reichsfuhrer SS and held firm anti-Semitic beliefs until her passing. Her daughter, Gudrun Burwitz, upheld her father's legacy, emerging as a notable figure within neo-Nazi circles until her own demise in 2018. Emmy Guring, wife of Hermann Göring, head of the Luftwaffe. On April 10, 1935, Emmy Sonnemann wed Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring in a highly publicized ceremony at the Dresden Frauenkirche. As Göring's second spouse, she took on the name Emmy Guring and fully embraced her position as a notable Nazi socialite, utilizing her theatrical background to host extravagant gatherings at Karenhall, Göring's country estate, named in honor of his first wife, Karen, where she welcomed foreign dignitaries such as Edward, Duke of Windsor, and Wallace Simpson. Their sole offspring, Edda Göring, was born on June 2, 1938, with Hermann famously commissioning 500 aircraft to fly over Berlin in celebration, a move that showcased both propaganda significance and personal pride. Emmy's marriage elevated her to the honorary title of Frau Reichsmarschall, solidifying her place within the upper echelons of Nazi society. She participated in various state ceremonies with prominent Nazi leaders, crafting an illusion of domestic normalcy despite the escalating brutality of the regime. Following Germany's capitulation in May 1945, Emmy and her daughter Edda were taken into custody by U.S. troops at their home in Sackdilling. In 1948, a denazification tribunal in Garmisch-Partenkirchen deemed her an active Nazi, sentencing her to a year in a labor camp, seizing 30% of her assets, and prohibiting her from performing for 5 years. During her time in the camp, she endured severe sciatica and often clashed with the authorities after displaying images of her deceased husband, who had taken his own life with cyanide in October 1946 while awaiting execution at Nuremberg as a convicted war criminal. Her denazification hearing featured testimonies from former colleagues, including actor Gustav Gründgens, but her refusal to express remorse for her Nazi affiliations resulted in a negative outcome. Upon her release, Emmy regained partial ownership of Karen Hall's summer retreat, Minluten on Sylt, which she sold in 1958 due to financial difficulties and public scrutiny. She moved to a simple 2-room cottage in Munich, lacking running water or electricity, a stark contrast to her previous luxurious lifestyle. Afflicted by sciatica, Emmy spent her later years in semi-isolation, publishing her memoir, An der Seite meines Mannes, in 1967, a work that was later translated as My Life with Göring in 1972. Emmy passed away on June 8, 1973, in Munich at the age of 80. She was laid to rest at Munich Waldfriedhof, leaving behind a legacy that is deeply intertwined with both Nazi splendor and post-war disgrace. While some women faced charges and punishment, others were allowed to live in freedom and start a new life. Lena Hydrick, wife of Reinhard Heydrich, chief architect of the Holocaust. Lena Hydrick became closely associated with the upper echelons of Nazi authority through her marriage to Reinhard Heydrich, a key figure in the planning of the Holocaust. They were married on 26 December 1931, following Lena's encouragement for Heydrich to embark on a career in the SS. Following their wedding, the Heydrichs initially made their home in Hamburg before relocating to Munich, where Reinhard's office was situated in their apartment. In June 1933, they welcomed their first son, Klaus, and in December 1934, their second son, Haider, was born. As Reinhard gained prominence under Himmler's influence, Lena managed a high-end household, although his frequent absences put a strain on their marriage. Their daughter, Silke, was born on April 9, 1939. In March 1939, following Germany's occupation of Czechoslovakia, Heydrich was appointed as the acting Reichsprotector of the newly established Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia. The Heydrichs then moved into the confiscated lower castle of Panenske Brzezany, which had previously belonged to Jewish industrialist Ferdinand Bloch-Bauer. At their opulent country estate, Karenhall, Lena hosted Nazi dignitaries, while in Prague, she managed household duties, all amidst the looming threat of resistance and retaliation. Lena's responsibilities included the expulsion of Jewish staff from the castle and overseeing forced laborers, whom she was reported to have mistreated. On May 27, 1942, Czech resistance fighters, trained by the British, launched an attack on Heydrich's motorcade in Prague. This operation was known as Operation Anthropoid. He succumbed to his injuries on June 4, 1942. His assassination led to severe revenge. The village of Lidi was destroyed, and nearly all its residents were unalived or deported. Following Reinhard's demise, Hitler awarded Lena the Jungfernbrechen estate in honor of her husband's contributions. That summer, on July 23, 1942, just weeks after her husband's funeral, Lena welcomed their fourth child, Marthe. As the tide of war turned against Germany in 1945, Lena escaped from Panenske Brzezany with her children, eventually making her way to Bavaria before returning to Fehmarn, where the British occupation permitted her to live in the family home. She was briefly detained by Allied forces, but was never formally charged. During the denazification process, she was categorized as a lesser offender, which allowed her to keep her property and secure a pension after winning legal battles against the West German government in 1956 and 1959. In 1965, during a vacation in Finland, Lena encountered and wed theater director Mauno Manninen, adopting his surname. Their marriage endured until his passing in September 1969. She operated a small eatery in Fehmarn until it was destroyed by fire in February 1969. In 1976, Lena released Leben mit einem Kriegsverbrecher, which means life with a war criminal, where she defended Reinhardt's actions and refuted his involvement in the Holocaust, portraying the Wannsee Conference as simply resettlement plans. Lena Hydrick passed away on 14 August 1985 in Fehmarn at the age of 74. Until her final days, she remained unapologetic, continually defending her husband's legacy and downplaying his culpability in the genocide. Her children, Klaus, passed on in a traffic accident in 1943. Heider, Silke, and Marti lived into adulthood, with Silke pursuing a career as an opera singer and Heider becoming a corporate executive. Ilsa Hess, wife of Rudolf Hess, Hitler's deputy Führer. Ilse Pröll was the oldest of 3 daughters born to physician Friedrich Pröll and his wife Elsa Meinecke in Hanover. Her father, a well-known medical doctor, lost his life during the Kapp Putsch in 1920, after which her mother married artist Karl Horn. A pioneer in higher education, Ilse pursued studies in Germanistics and library sciences at the University of Munich, one of the first women to be admitted there. In April 1920, she encountered Naval Lieutenant Rudolf Hess at a boarding house in Munich, and, captivated by his political aspirations, became a member of the Nazi Party in 1921. Although Hess was initially hesitant to enter into a relationship, Ilse's social network facilitated his introduction to Adolf Hitler, who supported their union. On December 20, 1927, Ilse and Rudolf were married in Munich, with Hitler serving as a witness and godfather. Throughout the 30s, Ilse was a steadfast supporter of her husband's swift ascent within the Nazi ranks, initially as deputy Führer and subsequently as Hitler's representative to the United Kingdom. On November 18, 1938, she gave birth to their sole child, Wolf Rudiger Hess, an occasion that was notably marked by Hitler taking on the role of godfather. When Rudolf Hess made his unauthorized journey to Scotland on May 10, 1941, aiming to broker peace, Ilse remained in Munich. Exhibiting her ideological dedication, she chose not to publicly condemn him and instead moved with Wolf Rudiger to Bad Hindelang in the Allgäu region, where she lived in isolation. After Germany's unconditional surrender, Ilse Hess was taken into custody by U.S. forces on June 3, 1947. Alongside other wives of convicted Nazi officials, and was held at the Augsburg-Gingen camp. During her interrogation, she displayed unwavering loyalty to her husband and the Nazi ideology. On March 24, 1948, Ilse was released from detention due to insufficient direct evidence of wartime offenses, which allowed her to return to the Allgäu. In 1955, she established a guest house in Galenberg, Bad Hindelang, showcasing her adjustment to civilian life while still benefiting from the relative comforts of her pre-war status. In the aftermath of the war, Ilse Hess emerged as a prolific writer of right-wing and revisionist literature, focused on restoring Rudolf Hess's reputation and defending National Socialism. Her first significant publication, England, Nuremberg, Spandau. Ein Schicksal in Briefen showcased letters from her husband's time in Spandau prison, portraying his flight as a martyrdom stemming from his loyalty to Hitler. Ilse Hess spent her later years in Lilienthal, Lower Saxony, where she continued to advocate for her husband's legacy and steadfastly refused to disavow his actions or those of the Nazi regime. On September 7, 1955, at the age of 95, she passed on in Lilienthal, marking the conclusion of one of the longest surviving spouses of a notable Nazi leader. Initially buried at Wunsiedel Cemetery next to Rudolf Hess, her grave became a site of neo-Nazi pilgrimages every August, coinciding with the anniversary of Hess's demise. In 2011, in response to the controversies surrounding the site, local authorities exhumed and cremated both Ilsa's and Rudolf's remains, scattering their ashes at sea and removing their headstone to prevent the site from turning into a neo-Nazi shrine. While other wives were dying at ripe old age, some were dying way younger than expected. Gerta Borman, wife of Martin Bormann, Hitler's secretary. Gerta Buch was born on October 23, 1909 in Constance, Germany, as the first of 4 children to Walter Busch, a notable judge in the Nazi Party, and Else Plosser. From a young age, both parents instilled in their children a strong anti-Semitic and National Socialist ideology. Initially, Gerta trained to be a kindergarten teacher, but after meeting Martin Bormann in late 1928, she took on the role of the ideal Nazi wife. They married on September 2, 1929, with Adolf Hitler as a witness, highlighting the political importance of their union. At the time of their marriage, Martin Bormann was advancing within the Nazi Party, and Gerta's connections to Nazi legal authority through her father bolstered his career within the party chancellery. Their first child, Adolf Martin Bormann Jr., was born in 1930 and named after Hitler, symbolizing both personal loyalty and propaganda significance. In the following decade, Gerta had 9 more children, although one daughter tragically passed away in infancy. Her commitment to large-scale motherhood earned her recognition as a champion of Hitler's demographic ambitions. Throughout the 30s and early 40s, Gerta Borman personified the Nazi ideal of the Aryan mother, managing a disciplined household in Berlin while Martin handled daily operations within Hitler's inner circle. She fervently adhered to party doctrine, even supporting her husband's public affair with actress Manja Behrens by encouraging him to father a child with each woman every year to ensure he always had a serviceable wife at home. This unconventional arrangement showcased Gerta's steadfast dedication to National Socialist objectives and the patriarchal framework that characterized Nazi family life, where the husband's career was prioritized over domestic stability. Despite Martin's frequent absences and infidelities, Gerta upheld her position as the hostess for Nazi social events, organized childcare, and advocated for Hitler's demographic policies among SS and party elites. By early 1945, as Allied forces pushed deeper into Germany, Martin Bormann stayed close to Hitler in the Führer bunker, while Gerta took steps to ensure the safety of their children by moving them to the village of Wolkenstein, located near Bolzano, Italy. Following Martin's choice to exit the bunker on April 30, either unalived or unaccounted for, Gerta and her 8 surviving children sought to avoid capture by traversing the mountain villages of South Tyrol. Their escape came to an end when Allied troops found them in Wolkenstein. Gerta faced several days of interrogation by U.S. forces at Untermais prison, where she expressed her complete loyalty to Nazi ideology and asserted her position as Martin Bormann's legitimate wife. Throughout this time, she hid the full scope of her husband's actions, but could not escape scrutiny, given her father's significant role in the Nazi regime and her own passionate beliefs. In the autumn of 1945, Gerta Borman was moved to a hospital in Merano, Italy, where medical tests indicated she was suffering from advanced uterine cancer. Doctors began administering experimental treatments that involved mercury-based compounds, which unfortunately resulted in acute mercury poisoning instead of directly addressing the tumor. Despite being young and previously in good health, Gerta passed away on April 23, 1946, at the age of 36, as complications from both the cancer and its toxic treatment took a toll on her already weakened state. At the time of her demise, she left behind 10 children. 8 of them survived the war and attended their mother's funeral procession, while 2 had passed on in early childhood. Gerta was laid to rest next to Private Horst Brugger in 610 at the Soldatenfriedhof Meran Military Cemetery, in accordance with the wartime protocols for deceased Germans in territories occupied by the Allies. In 1950, officials exhumed Gerta's remains from the military cemetery and cremated them, scattering her ashes at sea to avoid any memorialization that could become a focal point for neo-Nazi sentiment. Her surviving children were entrusted to Father Theodor Schmitz, a Catholic clergyman, and adopted into various Catholic families to cut their direct connections to Nazism. Martin Bormann's eldest son, Adolf Martin Jr., later abandoned Lutheranism to become a Roman Catholic priest in 1953, but ultimately left the priesthood in the late 60s. He married an ex-nun in 1971 and pursued an academic career in theology until his passing in 2013. Gerta Borman's journey, from Nazi matron to cancer victim dying far from her homeland, highlights the personal tragedies that accompanied the fall of the Third Reich and serves as a stark example of how ideological fervor and family loyalty, combined with political collapse, led to the destruction of even the most privileged Nazi families. Henrietta von Shirock. On August 3, 1932, Henrietta Hoffmann wed Baldur von Shirock, who had recently taken on the role of national leader of the Hitler Youth. Their wedding was a prominent event, showcasing both Hoffmann's connections to Hitler and von Shirock's swift rise within the party. The couple welcomed 4 children between 1933 and 1942, solidifying their image as an exemplary Nazi family. Despite Henriette's status as Frau Reichsjugendführer, her husband's responsibilities frequently kept him away, leaving her to largely oversee their home and children on her own. While von Shirock concentrated on indoctrinating the youth of Germany and later managed the deportation of the Jewish community in Vienna, Henriette projected an image of a devoted supporter of Nazi policies, yet she often found herself at odds with her husband regarding certain actions. In 1943, she allegedly implored Hitler at the Berghof to show more compassion towards the Jews in Amsterdam, a plea that enraged Hitler and momentarily strained her relationship with the Führer. As Allied forces advanced towards Germany in 1945, Henrietta and her children escaped from Vienna. She was later apprehended by U.S. occupation forces and held at Rum near Innsbruck. Baldur von Shirock faced trial at Nuremberg and received a 20-year sentence in Spandau prison. During his time behind bars, Henriette's marriage began to crumble. By July 1949, she officially initiated divorce proceedings, citing personal issues and her husband's extended imprisonment. The divorce was completed in October 1950. Following the divorce, Henrietta began a relationship with journalist Alfred H. Jacob and eventually married him, although that union also ended in divorce. Throughout the 50s and 60s, she lived a modest life in Munich, wrote a book about women associated with Hitler, and remained a staunch defender of her former husband's beliefs. Henrietta von Shirock passed away on January 27, 1992, in Munich at the age of 78, reportedly due to natural causes after experiencing a decline in health. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe to this channel, and turn on notification to get frequent updates on your screen.